All right, now this question set is going to be our first question set for the Cold War. All right, number one, the purpose of the 1947 General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is later referred to as GATT, was to, okay, this is one of those fill in the blank type questions. A, use tariffs to restrict international trade with communist countries. Okay, we don't like communism, but at the same time, we do want to promote trade, so it's not going to be that. B, raise money through the tariffs to rebuild Europe after World War II. No, it wasn't a big fundraiser. C, encourage countries to repay war debts by increasing tariffs. Again, that's going to bring the economies to a halt. Or D, expand international trade by mutual reduction of tariffs. This is what it is. Every time we place a tariff on somebody's stuff, they generally go back and place a tariff on our stuff. And as we add these tariffs, we drive the prices and things up, and it actually brings the economy to a halt. The answer on that one is D. All right, number two. President Eisenhower supported the establishment of the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, also known as SEATO, as an attempt to do what? A, assist nationalist movements in Asian countries. No, he wasn't promoting nationalist movements in Asian countries, so we can get rid of that one. B, counter British attempts to establish colonies in Asia. Okay, SEATO was established after World War II. The British aren't trying to establish any colonies after World War II. C, restrict communist aggression in Asian countries. That seems like something Eisenhower would be for, so let's hold on to that one. D, initiate programs for protection of human rights in Asia. Sounds good, and SEATO, would promote human rights, but that's not really what they were doing. The whole thing is going to be C, restrict communist aggression in Asian countries. Number three, which of these was a formal statement of intention of the United States to aid any country threatened by a communist aggression? So this goes back to, what, which just have to know which one of these deals with containment and keeping communism from spreading. Let's go ahead and talk about what we know here. Vietnamization, that's the whole idea that we're handing the war off to the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War. That has nothing to do with the spread of communist aggression, really. Okay? Well, I guess it does, but it doesn't. We kind of backed out of that. The Alliance for Progress, if I'm not mistaken, that's a New Deal program. The Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan has to do with foreign policy after World War II, but it's foreign economic policy. In other words, we're going to help Europe rebuild by providing them money. We're going to loan them money and keep them going. The Truman Doctrine, on the other hand, was it brought up this whole theory of containment, where we're going to keep communism from spreading. Okay, it was basically that we're going to send people to help anywhere in the world that communists are trying to take over. All right, number four. Which of these events was the closest to the United States and the Soviet Union actually came to fighting each other during the Cold War? All right, the Suez Crisis, not really that big a deal. We didn't really square off. The Bay of Pigs was not between us and the Soviets. It was actually between us and the Cubans, so that's not it. The Gulf of Tonkin, that was between us and the North Vietnamese. It's going to be C, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The Cubans had allowed the Soviets to place nuclear missiles on the island of Cuba, where they could literally reach all of the U.S. mainland. So that was a big deal. All right, number five. The Truman Doctrine was a pledge on the part of the United States to help Greece and Turkey do what? Okay, again, the Truman Doctrine is all about the resistance to communism. The only answer choice on this one that actually makes sense is going to be C, to resist the spread of communism in the region. All right, number six. Use the information below to complete the statement that follows. One way of life is based upon the will of the people and distinguished by freedom from political oppression. The second way of life is based on the will of a minority forcibly imposed upon the will of the majority. It relies upon the suppression of personal freedoms. This quote from a speech delivered in 1947 forms part of the rationale for the what? Okay, again, this is 1947. Which one of these has to do with the whole spread of communism and the Cold War? It's going to be the Truman Doctrine. It's Truman Doctrine, not A. Ignore the A that came up. It is C, Truman Doctrine. Number seven. What crisis brought the Soviet Union and the United States to the brink of nuclear war in 1962? We just talked about this one. Again, it's the closest that we actually came to actually fighting the Soviets. It's going to be D, the installation in Cuba of Soviet offensive intermediate range missiles. All right, number 7. This political cartoon, or use the political cartoon below to answer the following question. Soviets launched first man-made satellite into orbit. Okay, so if you look there, that's Uncle Sam, and Russian science literally flew by so fast it knocked his hat off. Okay, meanwhile, he's sitting there just holding a paper that says U.S. satellite program. Okay, what did the United States government do in response to the event referred to in the cartoon? We were terrified of Sputnik. Sputnik emphasized how far we really were behind the Soviets at that point in a lot of our technological advances. So, which one of these deals with that? Is going to be A, the government decided to seek peace immediately and end the Cold War. No. B, the government banned civilian contact with the United States and the Soviet between the United States and Soviet citizens. No. Now the Soviets actually might have stopped some of that, but the U.S. didn't. C, the government decided to spend more on both scientific and education and the military. That's going to be the answer right there. All right, number 9. Which statement explains why President John F. Kennedy ordered the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961? All right, so Bay of Pigs invasion, let me just refresh here. Um, a lot of Cubans left Cuba when Fidel Castro takes office, when he, overthrows the government. Okay, these were people that did not like Castro. They left. Our CIA gets the bright idea to train a bunch of them and let them, launch an invasion with the sole intent of killing Castro and overthrowing his regime. Okay, the problem was it was a failure. We had poor intelligence. Castro had wonderful intelligence. Castro knew it was coming. Castro was waiting, and lots of these Cuban nationals were slaughtered on the beach. Okay, so it was a failure. Now, why did we do this? Let's see here. A, the United States government believed that the new government in Cuba was the right wing dictatorship. It wasn't a right wing dictatorship, it was a dictatorship, but not right wing, so it's not A. B, the United States government feared stronger ties between between communist Cuba and the Soviet Union. The government before Castro had been technically a democracy. This one was a communist country. So that does raise concerns. Let's hold on to that one. C, the U.S. government suspected the Soviet Union had placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. We did, but not in 61. That wasn't until 62. D, the United States government wanted to acquire Cuba as an agricultural colony. That one's just absurd. We'll just skip that one. It's going to be B. Number 10. This is an excerpt from a speech by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1954. You have a row of dominoes set up. You knock over the first one, and what will happen to the last one is the certainty that it will go over very quickly. Which policy was supported by President Eisenhower's statement? Okay, now President Eisenhower talked about the domino theory and this whole idea that if one country became communist, other countries nearby would quickly become communist. Specifically, he was talking about Southeast Asia. So this talks about B, the containment of communism in Southeast Asia. All right, number 11. The line shows events that start the Cold War. And we have a blank down here for 1949. 1948, the Berlin airlift begins. The United States Air Force flies supplies to West Berlin following the Soviet blockade. In 47, okay, I'm sorry, I was reading it backwards. Okay, start with the Truman Doctrine makes it the U.S. policy to protect nations threatened by communism. All right, in 47. Secretary of State George C. Marshall calls for the United States plan to help Europe recover from World War II. In 48, the Berlin airlift happens where we start flying in supplies because the Soviets have blockaded West Berlin. So now we're on to 1949. What happens? The U.S. offers military aid to South Vietnam under the domino theory. This doesn't happen in 49. Doesn't happen until the 60s. B. The U.S. stops the Soviets' efforts to build a missile base in Cuba. Does not happen until the 60s. C. The United States forms a military alliance with countries in Western Europe. Let's hold on to that one. D. The U.S. establishes a space agency to compete with. This doesn't happen until the 50s. All right. It's going to be C. It's the only one that happens in the 40s, and that military alliance is NATO. All right, number 12. This excerpt from a 1947 speech by Secretary of State George C. Marshall. Um, let's see here. The truth of the matter is that Europe's requirements for the next 3 or 4 years of foreign food and other essential products, principally from America, are so much greater than her present ability to pay that she must have substantial additional help to face economic, social, and political deterioration of a very grave character. All right, so what he was saying is Europe needs way more than it can possibly afford to pay for right now, so we got to help them out. Now, why would we do this? What plan of action did Marshall recommend for the United States in post World War II in the post World War II period? A. Raise the prices on goods sold in Europe to increase profits. That doesn't make any sense. If we're trying to help them out, we're not going to raise prices. B. Provide financial support to Europe to limit the appeal of communism. In other words, if we help them out financially, they'll be more apt to look to us for help rather than look to communism for help. That's a possibility. Let's hold on to B. C. Train European workers in manufacturing methods to increase efficiency. They didn't have factories anymore. Their factories had been destroyed. Their resources had been destroyed. So that's not really an issue. It's not a possibility. D. Restore power to pre-war communist governments in Europe to maintain peace. It has nothing to do with it. It's going to be B. The Marshall Plan was all about providing financial support to Europe in hopes that these countries that we helped out financially wouldn't become communist. All right, number 13, in 1961, John F. Kennedy made this remark in an address to Congress. We stand for freedom. That is our conviction for ourselves, that it is our commitment to others. We are not against any man or any nation or any system except as it is hostile to freedom. How did this attitude expressed by President Kennedy affect the U.S. involvement in foreign affairs? So Kennedy basically says we're not opposed to anything as long as it's not opposed to freedom. So we're on the side of freedom. A. It established a basis for humanitarian aid. No, it has nothing to do with that. B. It established the need for treaties to halt proliferation of nuclear technology. Nothing to do with that. C. It justified the use of force to prevent the spread of communist regimes. Let's hold on to that. D. It justified the creation of diplomatic relations with communist leaders. Okay, so both of these, C and D, could possibly make sense. Now, the problem is he's not really talking about diplomacy here. He's not talking about negotiations. He's talking about using force. It's going to be C. And the whole thing is, to understand this, you have to understand that we did not associate communism with freedom. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So we opposed communism because it denied freedom. All right, number 14. This excerpt from a note delivered by the Soviet ambassador to the U.S. in June of 1948. The United States government wishes to call to the attention of the Soviet government the extremely serious international situation which has been brought about by the actions of the Soviet government by imposing the restrictive measures on transport which amount now to a blockade against the sectors in Berlin occupied by the U.S., Great Britain, and France. Which statement provides an accurate analysis of the incident? Okay, so this is 1948. This is after the war. Berlin is in the middle of East Germany, but West Berlin is technically still part of West Germany. The Soviets blockaded Berlin. This goes on. From here, we start carrying out what's referred to as the Berlin Airlift, where we started flying in supplies and dropping them because the Soviets wouldn't let anything in by road or by rail. Okay? So let's see here. A. It resulted in military conflicts to liberate the German city. No, we didn't liberate the city. We didn't fight anybody. B. It led to an increased interest in rebuilding German industries. No. C. It ended with a treaty between former allies that promoted peace. No, it didn't. Okay. D. It increased tension between two former allies that would last for decades. Yeah, this is really where the Cold War gets really kicked off and going. All right, number 5. This map up here. The shaded area of the map is above, or the map above is intended to show what? Okay, now the reason I put this map on here is because you'll see maps like this on the state test that aren't labeled. Um, the shaded area is Germany. And Germany is divided. Okay, so it's going to be A, the division between Western and Soviet control, or Germany, division of Germany between Western and Soviet control after World War II. This one should be pretty easy, by the way. If you sit here and look at the other questions, there were a lot that you could have eliminated straight off the bat. This isn't Asia, so it's not going to be anything to do with South Vietnam and the Viet Cong. See, it's not going to do anything. It doesn't have anything to do with India or Pakistan because again, not that part of the world. And also, same thing, North Korea and South Korea, nothing to do with this. This is Europe. Okay, so that in and of itself would have been enough to eliminate that.